Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Trevor Stockwell, the guest host for this special edition of the Fabulous Fempreneurship podcast. Thanks for joining us. It's another episode in the series where we're talking with the co-authors of the book, 8 Qualities for Great Leadership. Today, I'm talking with none other than Elaine Slatter herself. Welcome, Elaine.
Well, thank you, Trevor, for having me on the show.
How does it feel sitting the other side of the desk, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a little bit funny. I'm usually the one asking the question. So this is going to be very interesting to have you as the guest host today asking me questions. So this is going to be fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We've chatted on quite a few occasions and we've also collaborated quite a lot on the book. So we know where we each stand from a sort of leadership perspective and the passion that we have for it. So it's really good to chat to you today on this episode. We also get to sort of dig in a little bit more to what you've written in the book and cover slightly different aspects to it as well. So for the chapter in the book you've written, improving communication and engagement. And I think they're two key issues. Whether leadership sort of rises or falls really is determined by those two aspects. I'm sure a lot of the listeners can think, yeah, I can think of examples where it's worked well, and probably more obviously examples where it hasn't. So anything that you can share to help us all sharpen our leadership journey with regards to improving our communication and engaging with people, because they're separate issues, aren't they? They're not sort of just bagged together. Although you've sort of expounded on both in the chapter, they are two sort of key aspects that work together, but there's different elements involved with each of them. So yes, it's going to be exciting. Before we jump into all of the detail on that, for those that maybe are not so familiar with the show, they're not so familiar with what you've done so far, share a little bit about who Elaine is.
Okay, well, let's start off by saying I'm just like you. I was born in the UK, although my accent's a little different now. I grew up in the UK and went to college in the UK and then set out for an adventure to come to Canada via France. I lived in France for a year, but when you're young, you're very ambitious to, learn, grow, travel. So off I came to Canada and started a whole different career in Canada, and also got some more education when went to college and university here in Canada. Went married, had 2 kids, and sort of juggled everything, at that time, and then started a long career, a corporate career. And it was all basically in marketing. And of course, the core of marketing is communication and engagement. And so I worked for a large US corporation and did many, many projects worldwide. It was a worldwide company. And I think that's where, you hone the skills of communication and engagement, because it's cross-cultural. So you have to be very aware of that element in the corporate world. So in the end, at the end of my corporate life, I ran the Canadian division for this corporation and had all the, sales, marketing, IT, accounting, all those groups report to me. And I think that helped me even more understand that in communication and engagement and how important it is, because you have a wide variety of teams and they all communicate and engage differently. So that was a big learning curve for me too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what would you say would be, I suppose, sort of, if you look back now on part of sort of your journey and discovery on how key those two aspects are, what would be maybe the biggest thing that if someone would have told you then that you can share with the audience that would really have helped the journey go slightly smoother? What would that be?
Yeah, well, at the beginning, marketing was sort of a newer concept, I guess. Everybody knew about sales, but not so many people understood the link between sales and marketing. And I guess the biggest thing that I wish somebody had told me is that you have different audiences for your message. The way you're communicating should be different. And if you look at it from the perspective of people in general, we have this acronym in the US and Canada that says KISS, which is keep it simple, stupid, right? So, you know, that's one thing that I wish people had given me a tip on it, is to keep it simple. Like your message should be simple so that you haven't got so much fluff around the message that people tune it out the actual part of the message because there's so much fluff around it that they don't concentrate on the message. And I'd say the second tip that's really important, and I think a lot of politicians and business people should definitely pay attention to, is that you need to know the audience of your message. You know, we all talk differently to different people in our lives. You don't talk to your family the same way as you talk to a business associate. You don't talk to teenagers the same way as you talk to a senior citizen. You don't talk to children the same way as you would to your dog, for example. You know what I mean? So every audience, you have to make sure that if you've got a specific message, that it's tailored for that audience. And the same way when you are, you know, trying to form a community, when you're trying to engage your audience, engagement, or engage your employees, you've got to make sure that you understand that at the very beginning before you spout your message. Because if you get it all wrong, if you don't get the message tone right for the audience, or the engagement piece that you're trying to do right for the audience, like try to engage your audience when you're trying to come up with a program, then everything's going to really not resonate very well. You know, people are either tune out the message or they're not going to engage. So to me, that's the number one tip that I wish people had sort of pointed out earlier. I think I would have made fewer mistakes if I understood them, the medium better. And it's the same way in social media. Like the tone of the messaging and the way you're messaging is different for the different audiences. Like if it's a LinkedIn audience, if it's a TikTok audience, an Instagram audience, or Facebook, therefore, or Twitter, there are 5 different platforms, and therefore you have to make sure that your brand is distributed in each of those channels in the right way for that channel's audience, because they're all different.
Yeah, that's really good. There's lots of stuff in there. As you were chatting and I was listening to it, I was thinking, I want to ask you about this, I want to ask you about this. Maybe the first thing, just to sharpen in, you mentioned about sort of keeping it simple, keeping the message simple, and our communication simple. And that's, if we get that right internally, then it's more likely to flow to the external engagement and the way we communicate to customers, potential customers, and that sort of thing. So what I was thinking was, what would be, for people listening thinking, okay, Elaine's a smart lady, I've got to listen to her, I need to review how I communicate, how can I simplify my message? What would you say? Because there's pressure, isn't there, on leaders to make sure they communicate enough, and yet sometimes too much detail stops it from being simple. People don't listen, people switch off, people maybe don't understand it as well. So how have you sort of helped people get that balance right?
Well, I think if you picture yourself as part of the audience and how you'd like to receive the message yourself. So, okay, so say you're delivering bad news to a group of employees. Like, that's not an easy message. But if you are on the receiving end of that, how would you like somebody to explain it to you? Well, first of all, you want to lessen the impact on the audience, right? Because bad news is never good. You've got to come out with what the news is. Say you're downsizing. So what, if I was an employee, what would upset me the most when I hear the news from the corporate leader that they're going to right size the company, say it was Meta, Facebook's going through this right now. A lot of companies are actually going through it at the time we're speaking, because a recession is kind of looming and the corporate results aren't maybe quite what the corporation is looking for. So one of the ways you do that is cut your expenses. And one of the biggest expenses is the cost of employees, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to take a really good hard look at your employees and who's going to stay and who's going to go. But if I'm giving out that message, you have to do it in a humanistic way. So not the way that Elon Musk did it on Twitter. That is absolutely the wrong way to do it. You have to have empathy, because if I was an employee receiving that message, I want to know that my company is going to support me.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing you would come out with, that, due to circumstances beyond your control, this is what's going to happen in the next, and then spell out the time period. Is it in the next month? Is it 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it's going to be? And then talk about what you're going to do for the employees that you do have to let go. So are you going to give them their severance? Because that's the most important thing to the employee sitting there. I'm going to lose my paycheck. Am I going to lose it right away? Can I feed my family? Can I pay my mortgage? That's what's important to them. So you have to calm that employee down in your messaging, saying, yes, we understand this is very disruptive. We don't like to do this. We haven't done this in 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is. Like, make them feel that you have corporate responsibility and that you're going to do it in a very fair and human way. So that means that if the minimum employment standard says that you should give a week's severance for every year, then double it or triple it, so that the employee thinks, wow, that's really fair. So you want to leave the departing employees with the feeling that they're being treated really fairly. And then you've got the remaining employees that aren't going to be severed, that now they're thinking, oh my God, I got to do double the work. Am I ever going to get home? I mean, this sounds okay. I still have a job, but oh my God, I don't think I can handle all the work. So you have to calm the staying employees as to understanding that, you're going to review all the processes as well, so that maybe things that are being done now don't need to be done in the future, and that the workload for those that are remaining won't be significantly higher, and to be a very understanding employer. Because the thing is, people talk. If you don't come out and address it at the beginning, people are going to fill that void with their own opinion, right? They're going to say, oh, if I was a Twitter employee, I would be dishing on Twitter. Like on Twitter, I'd be dishing on how horrible it is, don't work for Twitter, so ever again. So you're putting a horrible feeling into future employees of that company too. They're not going to apply to Twitter, for example. But if you do it in a humanistic way, and you're centered on the people, on the employees, for example, in this particular case, then if that company starts to hire again in a year or two, whatever, in the back of your mind, you think, yeah, that might be an okay company to work for, because they were so great during, in 2023 when they had to do their layoffs. They were so fair. They were up front with what they were going to do. They addressed the employee questions, et cetera, et cetera. So once you've given that initial message out, always have a follow-up plan, so that you're open to hearing employees' concerns, because they want to vent, right? This is all news to them, and they're going to go home and they have to share it with their families if there's the possibility of no employment for them. but you want to give them a forum so they can discuss it. So it might be a town hall meeting. It could be booking a one-on-one with your team lead, whatever it is, so that the messaging is consistent throughout the company, so that only good things can come from not such a great message. So that would be my take on that.
Yeah. No, that is really good. I like that. It's more than just delivering the first message, isn't it? It's having that follow-up so that you're
Yeah,
taking people on that journey. It's an emotional journey, isn't it? Particularly if it's
yeah,
bad.
absolutely.
In lots of ways, if it's good news, it's like we can handle that ourselves. But the
Yeah,
bad news, we need to, yeah. And sad to say, good news, bad news, it's just part of the leader's job, isn't it? Really,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
like what you said as well, because if we don't control the narrative, like communication will happen anyway, won't it? Whether it's really good,
Exactly.
whether it's sort of toxic, it will happen anyway. And I think,
Yeah,
yeah, the more we can influence that from a leadership perspective of you care about people,
yeah.
you value the input they've had, so you're going to reward them with, you know, a higher than industry standard severance or whatever,
Mhm.
but also walk through the emotional journey that they've got, because who knows, 3-5 years from now they might want to come back and work for you if you look after them
Yeah,
well. If you burn them,
exactly.
there's just no positive outcome at all, is there?
No, no, they're going to move on and they never want to work for you again, ever, you
Yeah,
know. And
and bad
sometimes
news travels
exit
faster,
interviews
doesn't
are
it?
a great idea too. Exit interviews so that they can
Yeah,
do that, you know, an employee can do their venting on an exit interview, and that gives the company feedback on what they can do better in the future. And because we're all human beings working for a company, and we're not robots, right? So we have feelings and emotions, and we have aspirations. So as a leader, that's your responsibility to address those for every employee that comes to you with that situation. And if you have an HR department, that's great. Hopefully, you know, you're all on the same page, because that's extremely important. But if you're just a small business and you're the person delivering the message, and you're the person giving the severance, and you're the person doing the follow-up, then you have to be very aware, as you mentioned in your chapter on self-leadership. And a leader has to be very aware of themselves and how they come across to the different audiences, and that takes some time to lean in and hone those skills. I mean, they're all skills you can learn, and a lot of it you do by practice, right? It's not stuff you learn in books, it's stuff
yeah,
that you practice. And I think I go back all the time to, how would I like to be treated? You know, because you know, in your own life, things that have gone well, things that have gone not so well. And communication is right up there on the top. If you don't communicate the right way, then the result isn't going to be what you expect.
yeah, absolutely. And it's like you have to stay on top of it, don't you? Because you can
Mhm.
communicate really well in one scenario, and then it's not so much you drop your guard, but you drop the level of intentionality, I suppose, of making sure that you're refining the message so it's simple, but it's
Yeah.
clear, and it shows like the empathy that you're saying as well. It's such a
Mhm.
key thing. I think there is a danger that leaders hide behind the corporate announcement,
Yeah.
particularly bad news, and it's very disconnected, and that's not how you
Mhm.
sort of foster engagement, is it? Not good engagement anyway.
No, no. The leader has to be the leader of the emotional side of it too. They can't hide behind the corporate message.
Yeah,
You know, even a video, the leader can do a video so that people can see the person and the feeling, because in a video you can see the emotion, right? And the feeling and the empathy and all that kind of thing. And if you as a leader aren't sure that you're good at that, that's something you can still practice. You can get on a Zoom and Zoom yourself,
yeah,
and so you can see and then play it back as if you were the receiver of the messaging.
yeah,
Ooh, that was a bit harsh.
Yeah.
or, there was no emotion in that message, and I'm saying that if you do video, make sure that there's a, don't read the message. You have your points for the message, but it has to be heartfelt. So
Yeah.
make sure when you're giving the message out that it is a heartfelt message that people can say, yeah, he really means that, or she really means that. It's not just a canned speech that they're giving.
Yeah. Because people can tell, can't they?
Totally.
Generally.
Totally can
Yeah.
tell. Yeah.
No, that's really good. One other thing you mentioned on there, just before we there's lots more I want to ask you, but one of the things you mentioned was, and it's such a key point, I think it's worth going back to, just about if you've got a HR team or a team that's involved in the communication side of it, making sure they're all on the same page. And again, that's something that's often overlooked, isn't it? Or there's an assumption that everyone will understand and know, but a lot of the time that's just not true, is it?
No.
How would
Well,
you?
when you're giving out a message, especially a message that isn't good news, because those are the ones that are the hardest. The good news messages, everybody's going to be surprised or, happy, whatever. So those messages tend to kind of flow out okay, but it's the not so good messages. I think if you're a leader and you have a team, you get your team leads together before you announce it to the whole company and get their feedback, because they know their teams the best. Like, how are they going to receive it? So, if it's the sales manager, and you say, look, we're going to have to downsize the sales team by 2, how are your guys or girls going to receive that message and get their feedback on it and go through the different departments as well? So that they understand how, because they're going to be in that case of a larger company, if you've got 20 plus employees, your team leads are going to be the ones that are going to deliver the nuts and bolts of the message. So they have to know in advance what the message is. They have to know what you as a leader are thinking. They have to be able to interpret that message for their own department and calm them down in the second phase. So yes, having everybody on the same page is 100% important, 100%.
Yeah. And also, like, the team lead or whatever who's delivering the message, or not delivering the message, but if you give maybe a video message or whatever, everyone's going to go to their team leader to then express their delight or sadness or anger or whatever it is, isn't it? So yeah, it's from the leadership perspective, it's making sure you look after the team that are staying and are sort of having to rebuild and change the culture and all the rest of it, whilst the whole company sort of navigates through the process of having to let people go or whatever the scenario might be. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like what you said about getting feedback from other people, because one of the dangers we see is we can assume that everybody thinks the way we do or will respond in the way we do and all of that. And everyone's so different a lot of the time, aren't they? They're wired differently, going through different stuff, so they've got different pressures that maybe will cause them to react a different way at this point in time as you announce something, whereas 6 months ago they would have probably been quite relaxed about it, depending on what the message is. So this is good stuff. Any other bits and pieces with regards to communication and engagement? Any sort of strategies or just things that you think this is a really useful thing to share?
Well, I think good communications and engagement are the key core parts of your company culture. So that if you do this right, then your company culture will grow naturally into a really good culture. When you have a really good business culture, it is not difficult to get people to work with you, because funnily enough, people leave a company as long as the pay is generally okay. A lot of people leave a corporation because they can't handle the corporate culture. They have a horrible boss. They have terrible time frames to get the work done. There's too much pressure on the individual as a person. You know, it's not necessarily the work itself, it's the way the work is done, the way the employees engage with each other, how helpful other employees are, team members are, that kind of thing. And if you don't get your communication and engagement right, you're going to have a horrible corporate culture. It will just naturally grow to be horrible, right? The same happens if you're really good at communication and engagement, your company culture is going to flourish. Therefore, people that work for you will recommend other people. Like say you have an opening and you've got a head of sales that says, hey, you know, I understand you have a marketing opening. I know so-and-so, he worked for such and such. He's a great guy. He'd be a great fit. Because that's what you want. You want people not necessarily all the same in the way they work, that not necessarily, but they have the same sort of business cultural aspect. You get a toxic employee, one that hates working for you, trashes the company, that's not the kind of person you want. So if you've got that kind of environment, you're going to attract that kind of person. A sort of poisonous person, if you sort of could put it that way.
Yeah.
But if you have a great company corporate culture, then people are going to want to work for you. Your existing employees are going to want to recommend people that they know, you know, through working outside or inside the company, or, you know, if it's a large company, people that would fit your division, like, you know, work-wise. I definitely found that working for a large corporation, there were people I would interact with that I would think of for different jobs. They had no idea that I was kind of vetting them for those jobs or recommending them for those jobs. But it's the way they interacted. If I felt that they fit the way our corporation was, you know, in the culture, then I would definitely sort of promote them or cross promote them into other positions or recommend them for other positions. And that's what happened to me. I had a boss that was that way, that said, you know, like every time something came up that I was the right fit for, she would position me with the, you know, the top leadership of the company and give her recommendation for me to be on the team, because she knew that I would always have the back of the team and her back, et cetera, et cetera. So if you build those relationships and build a good culture, then it's going to help you advance as an employee. So yeah, very important, that culture that you develop in yourself and within your company.
Yeah, because like culture will attract other people of the same kind of position, shall we say. So yeah, exactly. Really good culture, it magnetizes good people. You got a toxic culture, you're not going to be attracting the people that you want to keep them.
You're not going to attract the top people if you have a toxic culture.
Yeah,
you know, they're going to find another company that's a better fit for them. Now, people don't necessarily say all this, right? But they're thinking this.
Yep.
They're thinking this. So although your message may not seem important at the time, it is extremely important to the individual. So yeah, it's one of the biggest things is communication and engagement. Absolutely. And the leader's responsibility is to make that the best that they can be, you know, the best communication, the best engagement, and bring everybody in on how to handle that too, like your team leads. Bring them in. What would you say? How would you say it? You know, get their input, because people like to give their own opinion, you know?
Yeah, no, that's crucial. Yeah, and sometimes it's not prioritized enough, is it? Like the targets are set, the mission is kind of communicated one way or another, but then it's almost diluted by the actions that follow, where the focus is on just the targets and not building a healthy sort of culture of well-being and looking after your staff and motivating them and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's such a key point to bring up. So
And
brilliant.
actually that starts on the hiring process. When you're hiring somebody for your company, communication and engagement is extremely important in the hiring process, right?
Yeah.
How you create the questions, how you interview people, how you show up as a leader, sort of is going to, one, bring out the best in the interview for your candidates, and two, help them want to come and work for you. So right from the very beginning, and then once you've hired your employee, communication and engagement, again, is extremely important. You just don't dump them into into the office space with their computer and their phone and whatever it is, the tangible things that go with the job and a job description. You have to make sure that they meet and greet everybody that is, in different departments, so that they feel comfortable. Like when we hired a person, they actually did no work for the whole of the first week. So the whole of the first week was spent in helping them understand what each department did, right down to the warehouse floor. They pick and pack orders, so they understood the RF system, because it all works together, right? And the person on the factory floor is just as important as the CEO. So, you know what I mean? Like, if you're hiring in, that communication engagement is so important right from the get-go, so that at the end of a week, an employee would say, wow, I learned so much this week. I learned how customer service worked, accounting worked, IT worked, sales worked, everything. And then I got to sit down with the CEO and ask whatever question I wanted to ask. How great is that?
Yeah.
And then the second week, you feel very relaxed and confident that you can fit into this company and add to it by the work that you do, right? So yeah, extremely important.
It also, I like what you said there, because it also sets the framework for every employee of the bigger picture, isn't it? Like, for some people, maybe they're not at the point where they really want to know all the details of what's going on, but once they're exposed to all the different facets and sees how it works, that can be sort of motivating, inspiring. Whereas if you've got people that are a lot more sort of keyed up and sort of motivated, then exposing them to the different facets and sort of how it all works together, you're going to encourage ideas, aren't you? Maybe they've got the idea that's going to transform your processes that nobody's thought of before, but suddenly, one suggestion, one idea, because you've created that space for them to grow, to learn about different parts than just, as you say, their job description. That's really good.
Right on. You absolutely hit the nail on the head there, because the more relaxed a person is when they're a newbie, the more open they are to giving out their ideas. And as you said, like, one great idea could save you like, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if the person isn't sure that they can feel free to give their idea, they're going to bottle that up, and you'll never be the recipient of the savings if you're the corporation, because the person didn't feel comfortable suggesting it in the first place.
No, that's really good. I think from all of what you said, we're very close to the end of the episode, but the thing that comes back to me from what you said at the beginning really is having the sort of the empathy aspect that fuels both how you communicate internally, but then externally as well. That's how you engage more. The more empathy we show towards the people that we're trying to help, whatever the goods, services we're providing, the more we're going to connect with them, aren't we? So it's going to be a positive perspective and experience from their point of view and for ours as well. So it's really good. Hopefully people are listening thinking, yeah, okay, I need to explore this more, find out more about how I can communicate in a more simpler way, but also how I can foster a good engagement and a culture where people engage at different levels, wherever they are in the sort of the business, the organization, however big or small it is as well. So that's really good. Obviously, we're going to say grab the book because we know it's got lots of valuable things in. Elaine's just touched on the surface of some of the bits in this chapter that she's written. It also links in well with culture from some of the other chapters, how to build good team culture that Rick sort of talked about. It's definitely worth exploring. Obviously, I'm biased, but I would say that. But we've both been in leadership for a long time, and we've seen
the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yes, yeah, and how costly it can be if
Yeah.
things are just not quite honed as well as they could be. Because leaders have more influence, there's a bigger effect. Obviously, when you get it right, it's very positive, and everyone benefits a lot more. But yes, that doesn't happen by default generally, does it?
No, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And if you do get your message wrong when you're delivering it the first time, then go back and correct it. Acknowledge that you didn't do a good job in explaining it, and explain it better the second time. There's no harm in that. Like, people want to know that their leaders aren't perfect. You know, we all make mistakes, and to acknowledge your mistake and move forward with it, you know, by giving the message in a slightly different way so that they understand it better. There's nothing wrong in that. So that's what I mean, that people, your employees, want to know that you're vulnerable too, that you're not perfect.
Yeah.
So bear that in mind, that when you're giving out your message, that you're not perfect yourself. So don't be afraid to show your imperfection.
Yeah. In lots of ways, that breeds a closer, stronger loyalty faster when it's sincere and it's done properly. It makes such a difference. So yeah, totally agree with all of that. This is brilliant. How can people that maybe don't listen to the podcast very often, obviously subscribe, listen to it more often, but how can people touch base with you in different ways?
Well, my corporate website, xlconsultinggroup.com, it has links to connect with me directly. It also, on our Fabulous Fempreneurship website, we have the same thing. We have mentorship for women entrepreneurs. We have a list of podcasts. You know, I also authored a book for startups, for female startups, and that's available on that website too. And if all else fails, you can get hold of me on WhatsApp at 905-639-3555, or by email at Elaine_Slater, spelled SLATTER, at xlconsultinggroup.com. So lots of ways to get in touch.
Brilliant. Absolutely. So there's no excuse for people listening not to get in touch and find out how Elaine can help you. Just to bring the humanity back, maybe in certain aspects of your leadership, or just helping you tweak your message. Lots of different ways. But definitely review the content that she shared already in this episode. There's lots, you won't catch it all the first time. I don't catch everything the first time I listen to certain episodes again, and you catch different things at different times when you need it.
Yeah.
That's what I've found as well. So
Exactly.
yeah. When the student's ready, the teacher appears, isn't it? Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. That's true.
Brilliant. Thanks, Elaine, for sharing. I know it's your show. Thank you for having me as a guest host. It's been really good. Look forward to when we get to chat again. Always good to chat about leadership and life and how we can help people lots of different ways. So thanks for your input.
Well, thank you for a fun interview. That was fantastic, and I really enjoyed the experience. Thank you.
Brilliant. No, that's good. And for everybody listening, just as we leave it here, we believe in you and we believe in your potential. Take action on something you've heard today, and you can scale your business, grow your leadership, whatever it is that needs to happen. Thanks for joining us. Catch you next time.